Alrighty, fair trade. What happens when people cheat? Right? And we're going to go ahead and take the example that we showed earlier. And that is what happens when China, Europe, and the United States, and specifically the United States, gets taken advantage of. Okay? When we look at the difference in how much money is being spent in which country, take a look over here. China gets an extra $374 billion pumped into their economy. Right? What that means is China's economy grew $347 billion due to the United States of America. Now, by the way, these are 2017 numbers, okay? So this was just a year and a half ago that these final numbers came from. And they just didn't get $374 billion boost from the U.S., but they also got $177 boost from the United Kingdom. Okay? They sent $375 billion worth of product, which means $375 billion went to China, but China only bought $189 billion worth of products from the European Union. So 374 and 177, wow, that's over $500 billion that just the United States and the European Union gave to the Chinese economy. And when you understand that the Chinese economy is controlled 100% totally by the Chinese government, right? Now we know that they're 110 on our 180 country scale as far as how free economies are, which means that the lower levels of the businesses in China have not so much government interference, but when you get to the higher level, the government controls the shots at the top. Now, not only did the United States give China $374 billion, they gave Europe, or the European Union, $107 billion. So just those two countries got almost $500 billion from the United States. In other words, our economy, instead of growing $500 billion, shrank $500 billion. I mean, think what would happen if it was an even trade between the countries. That meant that $500 billion would have meant a bigger growth in the U.S. and more jobs, more products, more opportunities for investment. So you're able to get a job today and pay for your stuff. You can buy the products, you can actually buy more products and you have more money to pay, and you have a better retirement fund going on because the economy's growing, not shrinking. So that's what happens when we cheat, and that's exactly what goes on. One of the things President Trump got right on the nose is we have been making terrible trade deals for decades. You could almost take a look at this and say, this is the United States supporting the rest of the world. Okay? We give economic aid through the State Department. Well, this is just another form of it. And this is more, because we don't give China anywhere near $374 billion a year for them to do things. And I want you to think about those numbers, because a little later, you're going to see where it's really a problem. Right? So, we do have some organizations that are here to promote free trade. The book went into this pretty well. We started out after World War II with something called GATT, or the General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade. This was the first organization, and it morphed into the World Trade Organization. Right? World Trade Organization, all of these countries, the ones in red are part of it, the ones in pink are trying to get there, and the ones in yellow, they really don't have an economy to work with. And if you take a look, that would be Somalia, that would be South Sudan, Eritrea, and let me see. Afghanistan. Right? Countries that really don't have a very big operating government. So this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get the whole world to get rid of all of that garbage and bring it into a free trading society. Negotiate the elimination or at least reduction of obstacles to trade. Remember those tariffs and barriers and all that other stuff that we talked about in protectionism. Trying to get rid of that. Agreement on rules. Administer and monitor the application of those rules. Here's the thing though. World Trade Organization, no teeth. There's no enforcement of this at all. All you can do is go, no, you're being bad, please stop that. Well, what would stop that is everybody, the World Trade Organization, as everybody else in the world, if somebody's cheating, then the whole trade organization cheats back against them. Or doesn't it actually cheat, we turn it into fair trade. If you're going to do this and you don't want to abide by our rules, then all of the member nations are going to do it right back to you. Now that would go ahead and get somebody's attention. Which, by the way, that's exactly what President Trump did to China, the European Union, Canada, and Mexico. We'll talk about those in a little bit. Okay. Also, we're looking to go ahead and monitor trade policies from all of the countries. Make sure they're actually doing, putting in policies that make this happen. They want to make sure it's transparent. You can see it all. It's kind of hard to see things when some governments don't allow transparency to happen. And they look at settling disputes. But again, there's no teeth, so all they can do is wag a finger. They want to help building developing countries. All right? Get the countries that are, their standard of living is way, way below ours. Well, let's go ahead and help them get bigger. And we do. We help around the world to get them bigger. But why do we keep getting bigger than them? Because we're already there. Are we supposed to go ahead and stop getting better, faster, and cheaper so the rest of the world can catch up? I mean, think about what that would do to your standard of living. No, we keep getting better, and we keep helping the other countries get better. But because of where we are, we're going to get better faster. That's all. I mean, that's normal. Europe, remember, Britain used to be the #1 economy in the world. After World War II, they started putting in a lot of socialist policies. And all of a sudden, we just zipped past them by light speed. Okay? We're also supposed to go ahead and insist the countries, the pink countries that are trying to get into World Organization, to do that. And they're also taking a look at economics and explanation, going ahead and help them understand what's going on. So these are the key things of the World Trade Organization. Yet, just about every time the World Trade Organization has an annual meeting, we got protesters throwing firebombs and all that kind of stuff at them. Why? They're there to go ahead and uplift every country in the world. They want everybody to freely trade and specialize so everybody's standard of living grows. You need to ask yourself, what are these protesters protesting? They want every country to have a worse standard of living? I mean, think about that. Because I don't think a lot of the protesters do. All right, so, European Union. Now, when it started out, it was an economic union. Instead of having trade agreements amongst each country, they decided, let's all get together, and in one voice, we will now become kind of like the United States of Europe economically. And over the decades, it's morphed into a political union instead of their economic union. That's why a lot of countries, there's a lot of static, a lot of protesting in countries because the people don't want to be run by a European parliament. They want to be run by their country. Big reason we had Brexit. All right, Brexit was tired of having to run under European rules, and most of the European rules government control of economics and other aspects of their lives. So big reason that we had Brexit, and now they're out and they're trying to figure out how they're going to work within the Europe economy. Now, we did have something called the Transatlantic Trade and Investment Partnership, called TTIP. This was something President Obama was trying to establish. Now, this would have meant 29 countries, 28 European Union countries at the time, and us, there's 29, representing 46% of the world's GDP. In other words, almost half of the world's GDP is between these two groups. But here's the thing. If each of the countries, first off, each of the countries have one vote. If a majority decides that this is what we're going to do, everybody has to follow through. This is where the European Union started to have their problems. And this is where there was a lot of protest against it from folks here in the United States, because we would all of a sudden be starting being governed by possibly the European Union, because their countries outnumber our vote, even though our economy outnumbers theirs. So this is one of the first things President Trump killed, not because it was a bad thing or anything. What he said is he would like to have an individual trade agreement with each of the individual countries. All right, we don't hear too much about that part. It wasn't that he didn't want to trade with Europe. He just didn't like the idea of, if a majority of European countries decided this is where we wanted to go, such as the majority right now think we should have government-controlled economies, we'd have a government-controlled economy in the United States. Doesn't like that idea. Thinks we should be a capitalist-focused economy. So that's why this was killed, but he is very interested in having individual ones. Problem is, the European Union doesn't want any of that. Also, the same thing was getting ready to happen in the Pacific. It was called the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And there were 12 countries, so you can see them all allotted out here, but the same thing. But these 12 countries, 40% of the world GDP. In this particular case, we had Canada and Mexico along with some of these other countries. But the same thing happens. If 7 of the countries decided this is the way we go, all 12 have to do that. So, again, it was not the idea, because most of these countries, they do not like socialist-run economies. Even Vietnam, right, over here, they've been moving more towards the capitalist side over the decades since the war ended. But they could revert the other direction. So, having individual ones, not a problem. Just like our example with us in Mexico. We have an individual one, trade agreement with Mexico. We can go ahead and decide what we're going to specialize in and what the trade negotiations are going to be. That's really what an individual trade agreement is. That's all. So keep the government out of it and just let the businesses run. So again, this was also nixed because we wanted to get into a world thing where we don't control our destiny. Other countries would control the destiny and the economy of the United States, which means they would control your standard of living. Somebody in Vietnam, somebody in Hungary would control your standard of living, not our elected representatives that if we don't like how it's going, we can change them out. So that was the real reason for TTIP and the TPP being nixed in the first year of Trump's administration. Since then, he's been working on bilateral, or in other words, trade agreement between the United States and another country. Of course, the big one was NAFTA. Remember, when the European Union, they got together economically because they wanted to be number one. Right? They wanted all of their economies to be bigger than the United States economy. And they were getting close. And that's when the United States said, well, maybe we should talk to Canada and Mexico and have our trade agreements, have a economic trade zone with 3 countries instead of 2. Okay, this is the first one that we actually started. Well, maybe we'll do 3 because in the new agreement, it doesn't last forever. See, NAFTA will last forever until it got broke. Trump broke it. Why? Because there were a lot of bad things in it. There were some good things, there were some bad things. But one of the things is NAFTA just kept going and going and going and going. The USMCA is only there for 16 years. And then we can replace it if we want. Not only that, but after several years, we can review it to see if we need to modify it. So those are in there, not in NAFTA. So you could say, well, Canada and Mexico can tell the U.S. what to do. Not anymore, not with the USMCA. So we had NAFTA, we converted it to this. The other reason, besides the thing of sovereignty, was that China was getting really into the U.S., Canada, and Mexico's economies. As a matter of fact, Mexico was losing jobs to China. So several points of this were specifically set up to make sure China backs off, because again, China was not freely trading. And we'll talk a little bit more about how they did that in a minute. But country of origin rules. 75% of all stuff produced in NAFTA has to come from the 3 NAFTA nations. That's up from like 62.5%. And what China was doing is they were flooding the market with stuff that would normally come from Mexico. We kept saying, oh, Mexico's stealing all our jobs and blah, blah. Well, China was stealing the jobs from Mexico. So if the Mexican workers are being paid bad, you can just figure out what the Chinese workers are being paid. But to work with that, there's certain labor provisions. 40 to 45% of all automotive parts have to be made by workers who are earning at least $16 an hour by 2023. Everybody's going, oh, well, we need $15 hour minimum wage. Hey, guess what? USMCA, which Trump signed, $16 an hour. Now, that's automotive workers. Why? Because the automotive company can afford that. That was basically focused on Mexico, so that they go ahead and start paying their workers more for their products. They get paid more because the vehicles are being sold, but the workers aren't getting the benefit of the profit that American workers are. Okay? And then, of course, intellectual property and digital trade. Here's where China literally steals music, movies, books, you name it. If it's on a disc, they're stealing it. Literally. They'll go ahead and, like the movie 1917, that's one of the newer movies out. A Chinese company will order one of those from the American company. They will go into a big room, plug it into one machine, and they may have several hundred machines that it's taping to, or it's recording to. And then they'll go sell those, and so, well, what's the problem with that? Well, anytime you do that kind of piracy, remember, the people that made that DVD are getting a royalty, or in other words, every time it's sold, they're getting a little money from that. Well, China just went ahead and deleted all of that. None of that money goes back to who produced it. So a couple of things happen. They either raise the price because they know China's stealing it, which means it's costing the U.S. household more money to buy or go see in a movie theater, or they don't do it at all, which means we don't have the pleasure or benefit of seeing that, or hearing new music, or having new books, or anything along those lines. So this is supposed to go ahead and do that, and the copyright goes up to 70 years. Currently it's 20. And then there's a couple more sections. One of them, you remember, Trump got the USMCA passed because he said he was just going to cancel NAFTA. Well, part of that agreement here is he can't do that. And, or his other thing was, well, maybe I can't cancel it because we did sign it. It was a treaty. It says, well, nothing in NAFTA says I can't put tariffs on your stuff. Which is where he actually got the muscle to bring Mexico and Canada to the table. You know, we've been trying to, you know, people have been thinking about trying to renegotiate this for decades. What happens? Trump goes ahead and slaps tariffs on Canada and Mexico. Boom. They're right in our negotiating conferences to go ahead and get this done. And it got done. The day after Trump put tariffs on European Union stuff, the European Union leader was calling us saying, hey, when can we come over to talk? A week later, their whole delegation is here in Washington, D.C. Not there, but they're in here in Washington, D.C. trying to figure out how we can make this better. Now, we're still having problems on that one, but guess what? We have USMCA. Now, let's take a look at what happens with the corporate tax, okay? Now, first off, we already went through, and for those of you that haven't got to the part, you know, before we got into this coronavirus thing, of businesses never, ever, ever, never, never, ever pay taxes, I will be putting a video on there, and it'll be extra credit for you guys to read it and comment on it. Or excuse me, listen to it and comment on it. But I'll tell you right now, long run, households pay all taxes. Businesses don't pay a penny. And for those of you who are going, oh, that can't be right, wait for the video and go ahead and take a look at it. That'll be coming out next week. Or actually, yeah, the next few days. So, the United States used to have a corporate tax of 35%. Now, corporations, at the beginning, they have to write that check. So, that money comes right out of their profits at the beginning. So, we'll just go ahead and look at it that we've got a 35% taxes here in the U.S. Now, Canada, their corporate tax is 26.5%. Wow, that's lower. Down in Mexico, it's 30%. Ooh, that's still lower. What are the benefits of Canada and Mexico? Well, Canada has a very educated workforce. They don't have a large workforce because it's a very big country, but not a whole lot of population, but it's very educated. Mexico has a very large, it's unskilled, but it's a large labor force of unskilled workers. So we had some companies that started to take a look at, well, if I need an educated workforce, can I move to Canada? If I just need a low-skilled labor force, what can I do to move to Mexico? Because obviously, higher skilled, higher educated, paying them more money. Lower skilled, lower educated, paying them less money. Now not only are taxes going down, but we can start seeing payrolls might be going down. Very big incentive. So what happened? Well, Company A, who happened to do auto parts, moved to Mexico. Now here's the thing. Remember, we have NAFTA. There's no tariffs or anything going from Mexico to the U.S. So this company took a look, moved the factory, and why did they move it? Well, their taxes went down. Company A's taxes went down 5%, and their labor went down. Plus, it doesn't cost anything for them to come back from Mexico. Then we had Company B, who was looking to relocate their corporate headquarters. This was one of our food chains. And why? Well, hey, 8.5% reduction in taxes. Plus, they still have an educated workforce. Boom. Both of them moved out. Then December 2017 happened. And actually, it was a build-up all year in 2017, but in December 2017, we passed a tax program, a new one. Okay? And our tax rate went down to 21%. They go, well, wait a minute. Canada's at 26.5. Mexico's at 30. Guess what started happening? Ooh, and we have an educated and unskilled labor pool. Wow. Companies from Mexico started coming back in. Companies from Canada started coming back in. And companies from all around the world started to come in. Companies that are already here started to expand, and our economy grew hugely, right? And was continuing to grow up until the coronavirus problem. Okay? Now, that's what happened with the tax plan. So let's now take a look at trade wars. Should we have them or shouldn't we have them? Well, we're going to take a look. We talked about this already. And we talked about basically China getting the benefit of all of this stuff. Well, let's take a look at what this actually did. Okay, first off, China is able to subsidize industries that are going to the United States. Some of you may not have heard of a company called Solyndra. Right? That was we got a solar panel company that was given money in the plan that President Obama had to go ahead and stimulate our economy. You know, that shovel-ready job stimulus plan that, remember, it wasn't just President Obama's, it was also President Bush's. They both got together. Bush started it, Obama finished it. But what for this company Solyndra, the solar power company, or the solar panel company, they had to start from ground going up. So what happened was is the government gave them enough money to last 3 years. They figured by the end of 3 years, they would get better, faster, and cheaper enough that they would be able to compete with, in this case, China. At the end of the 3 years, Solyndra could sell a solar panel for $300 a panel. China was selling them for $100 a panel. And of course go, wait a minute, $300 a panel, $100 a panel. We're going to buy the $100 a panel. But why was it so cheap? Because it was being subsidized by the Chinese government. So what happened was, is Solyndra went bankrupt. Boom, gone. China now controls the solar panel market. Same concepts that are happening with the supply chain in our country as we're going through the coronavirus. Most of our medical inputs, you know, the resources or the parts that come into not just our medical gadgets, but also the pills that we take, all comes from China. Why? Because China was subsidizing their companies to do it, and now, literally, China could go ahead and say, well, we're not sending anything to the United States, and nothing comes here. And all those great drug treatments and everything else, and all the pills that are keeping grandma, grandpa, and maybe some others alive and functioning to a high extent, we can't get them anymore. Because all the ingredients come from China, or different parts come from China. This is what happens when you have specialization, which we did, but you don't have free trade. That's why there's a lot of talk of bringing the supply chain out of China and back to the United States. Yes, it will cost more, but a country that doesn't like us can't say, well, you're not getting it anymore. Right? And right now, China can't do that because they would actually, we would be hurt, but they would be hurt worse because they're still getting more stuff from the rest of the world. But what would happen if they were at a point where the rest of the world was getting more stuff from China? Think of the control they would have on every country in the world, including ours. Let me see. Second part. China is demanding that this South China Sea down here, and to a lesser extent the East China Sea, that all countries leave that area, that they belong to China. By the way, Taiwan also belongs to China. It's not an independent country. And the whole world has to leave. Well, down in the South China Sea, they actually, all the countries down here that own the different islands in China went to the World Court, and the World Court said, China, you're out of your mind. These other countries have the deeds to those islands and they are theirs. China said, screw you, and they decided to start establishing not just man-built islands, but they also have now aircraft, they have defense missiles out there, and when we go ahead and send any kind of ships through there, they're demanding that you have to have permission from China for anything going on sea or in the air through this area, get permission from China to do. But China doesn't own it. Now, why do you think China wants to do that? Well, let me see. First off, 8% of all world shipping traffic goes through that area. Can you imagine if China decided to tax 8% of the world's seagoing traffic? They could also say, yeah, your ships can't go through there. Now it's going to cost more for them to go in other directions. And there are huge oil fields, not only in the South China Sea, but also in the East China Sea. Huge underground oil fields that could help China become energy independent and make sure the rest of the world can't get it. And one of their competitors, especially in the East China Sea, is Japan. Japan is a country with not a lot of resources. As a matter of fact, one of the reasons they went to war in World War II against us is they didn't have any oil. They have very little oil in Japan itself. But there's huge oil deposits down here, which actually do fall under Japanese mandate. Just like all of the ones down here fall under a whole bunch of other different countries' mandate. So, we take a look at, here's Solyndra, there's the solar panels going away. Here's the supply chain with all the medical stuff that could get cut off from the U.S. And let's take a look at one other thing. If you hadn't heard in the news recently, there's a Chinese carrier that went up through the Taiwan Straits. And the big thing was, oh, China can handle coronavirus better. Look, their carrier is out there operating. The Teddy Roosevelt is in port because we can't handle coronavirus. And they have a huge army. Well, their 2019 military budget was $177.61 billion. Now remember, they got $374 billion from the United States, another $177 billion from the European Union, or over $500 billion. How are they building up their Navy? With our money. How are they subsidizing other products? With our own money. You can see a problem building here if they ever want to come and really be belligerent. Right now, they're kind of being belligerent. One exercise, this was a U.S. ship, Decanter, was challenged by a Chinese destroyer. Now this is part of the South China Sea. This is the part where China says you can't go through unless you get our permission. Well, here's the U.S. warship. Now this Chinese